Welcome all to another edition of Matt and Matt. This is the third edition. We'll probably have to stop saying the numbers at some point, Matt, when we reach into the hundreds, right?
Not yet, right? Let's hope for the future, right?
That's right. So right off the top, we talk every 2 weeks or so, and in the first week of this time period, you spent some good time in New York. Tell us about what was going on there.
Yeah, unfortunately, you and I did not get to connect. You were right across the river, so to speak. Couple train stops, bus stops, and time in a car away. But we could have made it work. Unfortunately, I was busy. I was doing some work, but also there for spring break with my son, who is I know I've shared a lot on LinkedIn about this. So. Proud dad moment. I mean, he's graduating from the University of Florida in April, end of April. And he's a BFA, which is an exclusive program at a lot of schools that focus on fine arts. And his happens to be theater and performance. He's an excellent vocalist. He plays guitar like you and I do. Better than I do. Oh gosh, he's getting so good at it. But his real gift is singing, and he's taken a shot at the big leagues up in New York on Broadway. So we were up doing like a showcase for the University of Florida graduating class. So it's a small BFA concentration. And we got to go to this place called 54 Below, which, you've heard about the infamous Studio 54. So this is like in the same neck of the woods. But it's just really beautiful, classic big city club. You go downstairs into it, dark wood, really ornate ceilings. You sit at small tables, just like, in Goodfellas, and you watch someone perform up on stage. And they just knocked it out of the park. It was just a lot of fun to watch. I will say earlier in the week, so, I'm a fan of theater and live performance. I think, especially these days when we do so much in the digital realm, it's really nice to get out and see live performance happening. And we got to see a couple shows. One was Oh Mary, which is a comedy. It's based on Mary Lincoln Todd, and it's reimagines the whole story. I won't give too much away, but it's hilarious. And we stayed behind, and one of the actors in the show is Simu Liu from Marvel. He was in Shang-Chi, and he's now, I guess, in other Marvel films. Well, if you're a fan of Broadway, if you hang out at the exits of the theater, especially for these kinds of like not as big shows, maybe smaller shows, the artists, the performers will come out and meet you. They'll talk to you, and it's a way for fans to get that much more connected, just like we used to do with you'd hang around at at games, and the athletes would sometimes come out of the locker room doors. You get an autograph or a couple seconds to hang out with them. This was like the Super Bowl for that, right? So we got to meet him, spend a couple seconds talking to him, and then we went to see Stranger Things has a Broadway show, right? So this kind of I don't know, intersection of universes, right? Where digital becomes physical.
Digital, isn't that what they call it?
Something like that, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's this morphing of things that you think they couldn't do on stage into the live realm, and it was breathtaking. I mean, they did things in theater that I didn't think was possible with practical effects. At one point, they actually have a battleship that comes out on the stage. I mean, the whole time my jaw is on the floor. It was really just spectacular to see. And of course, being in New York a few times a year, being from the Northeast originally, always make time as a foodie to go check out the food scene. But I just can't get any good pizza in Florida. I think that, I stand by either it's the water or there's something mystical about the pizza in New York and Boston.
And the bagels. It's the same water.
Same water, man, right? So I think and you could probably write a book on this, growing up in New Jersey, but it is just an incredible part of the experience to go out and seek out new food, but then also go to Joe's or go to some place that is the go-to for pizza. So it was a great adventure. It was a little chilly. Made my way out to Central Park a couple mornings to run. It was spectacular and horrible at the same time. It was just freezing. But it was a great week. And also had an opportunity to work on a couple things while I was up there as well. Tell me a little bit about what's been happening with you on your end.
Yeah, I mean, just a lot of activity. I'm in month 2, maybe, oh wow, maybe more than coming to the end of month 2 of my time at iMedia, and it's been like an unleashing of connecting and reconnecting with everybody I really like across the continuum of our space and technology and AI, and I just feel so kind of enlivened by all the activities
Yeah.
happening out there. And I've just been doing lots of interviews. I'm now using the same Riverside platform that we're using right now for our show to uh, you have so many great conversations, and it might feel a little meta or Gary V, but I thought, why don't we record? Why don't we record a lot of these conversations? I'm not saying client conversations, things with information that shouldn't get out.
Right.
I'm not doing it when people don't know, but it's been great because you'll get many clips. I always like that quote. I think I've said it to you before and probably on here, but any life will seem dramatic if you omit mention of most of it, which is the quote by Ann Beattie, the writer. And so if you if you catalog as much of those moments as you can, you're going to find a lot of those dramatic moments. So
Yeah.
that's been really that's been really great. I think that I've been off for I've been home for a couple of weeks, I'd say. So it's funny when you're on the road, you yearn to be home, and then when you're home, you feel antsy about you should be on the road. I don't know what the right days are. The right amount of days. Is it
Right.
7? I don't
Yeah.
know, but it's what you brought about there, coming to New York. It's really cool to live here because you can almost get that experience just on a weekend, right? And it's not like a
Right.
crazy flight for you, but it's kind of cool to just come into the city and give yourself to it like you're an inhabitant, like you have an apartment there on Central Park or something, and just how much is happening from block to block, and how each block is like, if you go over to New Jersey, each block is a town.
Yeah.
And
Right.
that I've always had people say to me, "Oh my gosh, are you sure you want to go into the city today? This thing's happening. This is happening at the UN." And I always say, the city can the city can accommodate maybe 25 enormous things happening, and you don't feel it
Yeah.
on one
Seriously.
side over the other.
Right.
But the pizza thing is huge. I remember when there was a period where I lived in Arizona for a while,
Oh,
and they
that's
had this
right.
place called NYPD, the New York Pizza Department, and I was like, this is really bad in more ways than one. But I think
Yeah.
there's no better way than to just give yourself to the city, walk
Yeah.
as much as you can around, run around, get you there even sooner, and just to land on things like what you said there with Broadway. People don't realize how small Broadway is. And
It
so
really is.
when you
Yeah.
go, it's just house to house to house to house.
Yeah.
And like you said, major actors who are in known universes on TV, they go here to get the real work done, and they love it. And I always like looking at the schedules and thinking, oh, they're doing that like 5 nights a week, and then on Sunday they're doing it twice. And I have
Ugh,
such an
no.
appreciation, but they love it. And then
Yeah.
that feeling of just amazingness after. I remember seeing, of all people, Jerry Adler, that guy, that older guy, he passed away a couple
Oh
of
yeah.
years ago,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. I
he was
remember. Yep.
he was Hesh in The Sopranos,
Yep.
and he was also in The Good Wife and all that. And I forget what show I saw, but he was in, and he just walks out of there. He's walking the street, like people are like, "Hey, Jerry," and th- there's just nothing about that centrality of whatever you want to do. It's something different than
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
than anywhere else in the world.
It's a big system. But, we did when it comes to working inside of big systems, we tend to gravitate towards like our small piece of it. What can we actually fit into our brains to understand? And your framing of it that, there could be 25 major events going on and you wouldn't have any kind of seismic sense of it affecting anything you're doing. The half marathon was going on in Times Square. The one morning I went out. Now last summer when I was in doing a boy event out in Mountain View, And then I did a hackathon, an AWS hackathon, like a couple weeks later in San Francisco. And I just happened to wake up one morning, go down. I was going to run between the bridges, and they were doing the San Francisco half marathon. So I popped into it because I had the time. I had the time that morning to, just spend I'm constantly in training mode, and I was just low key and beautiful. Like, it was just a great thing to drop into. I didn't do it this time. I wasn't even sure I was going to be able to stay out that long. It was so darn cold. But I I had no sense of it. Like, if you went outside, just a few blocks outside of Times Square, you had no idea that there was a half marathon going on. You get into Times Square, and at 5:00, 5:30 in the morning, there's gates up everywhere. There are cops swarming. I mean, you could see people starting to coalesce. It's that sense of being incredibly active and then also incredibly quiet in other areas, right? Where you wouldn't even know. You could almost not drop a pin, but there are definitely parts of the city where it feels like you can escape it a little bit. You can escape the frenetic energy that's happening around you. But I guess I want to talk a little bit about, just because a good segue. I think this is also this question about visibility versus invisibility, right? I mean, I read recently that scientists say that most of the known universe is invisible to us, right? And logic would kind of dictate that, right? If you go into space, there's all this cosmic radiation. There's this background stuff that's happening that you were not even aware of.
How about
And most
Stranger
of
Things?
Stranger Things, right? Exactly. I'm threading the needle back to Broadway, but I think that this is the struggle. As you can probably relate, and I want to hand the mic back to you to talk a little bit about this. But I'll kind of set the foundation here for a piece I'm about to push, an interview with Eric Stein at Psychor about visibility being such a key part of what we're focused on now. And there's more to it than just the practices that we're investing in, right? There's really this sort of innate understanding as a business and as a marketer that visibility is one of the key objectives. And what do we need to be doing to best structure how our content and experiences are enabling that for a partially machine-driven world, right? Not just humans anymore, but how are machines able to engage with what we're creating? But you're doing a lot with this. Before we got on this call, you talked a little bit about how you're very laser focused on this as an issue with customers. But I think we're going to probably talk about this on every call a little bit as we move the needle more and more. But where are you at right now with, maybe with engaging with customers around generative engine optimization, answer engine optimization, our favorite new acronyms, and how it's, just continuing to be like a central point of gravity?
It's finally the organizing principle. I think we jokingly called it in a previous talk, like the greatest wedge in the history of the DXP industry, or whatever our industry is, whatever acronym we want to say. It is so front and center. As you said in our last chat, it is a boardroom discussion. It is so front and center because it is about the loss of traffic, and then traffic being lost means loss of revenue opportunity. And there's a zero-click aspect, as they say to this, as it is, that clicks are already lower even if you are being cited, but that
Right.
those clicks that do come convert at anywhere from 4x and up. So you have to be visible there. And for me, I'm doing a lot of talks. I have done a lot of talks since the start of the year in January at the Boy and Company CMS kickoff. This idea of thought leadership and content in the form of what I call influencing, through video, audio, written, using clips from video and audio, turning them into written, structured content, that is the best way to be cited in these answer engines, because they crave so much of human firsthand experience. We can ask it to generate an artificial mock-up of human experience, or use all of the known content as they peruse the whole web, the corpus of the web, to generate it. But there's nothing better than, for instance, you going through New York City and your journey through the city and the reasons you were there and the things you wanted to see and the serendipity of who you came across, And just the very fact of, I mean, I love the fact that it's like we have these beings that we create that give us a reason to go somewhere cool for a vacation. I mean, that's pretty cool. But it's this idea that I think is opening up a world of active promotion and marketing that is authentic, because we've talked about these EAT principles, right? Experience, expertise, authority, and trustworthiness. And every time I say it, I'm like, oh my gosh, as I get to each letter, I'm like, what is it again? But each, that is what these engines want. And these engines are what are determining that you are visible or not. So yes, paid is coming to ChatGPT. I was just talking to someone who said the early signs on that have not been great, but I don't know what that means. They'll figure it out. When there's money to be spent, they'll
Right.
figure it out. Facebook did. That was famously what did it for Facebook, right? Once they figured out mobile and advertising, boom. So everyone's going to be there. So you need to appear there. And the beauty of it now is through authentic, trustworthy content from ambassadors of your brand. It's a great alignment of goodness. And so to me, the really fascinating thing is not only looking at the visibility for customers and not to bury the lead or spoil the ending. Most customers have lost a lot. Gartner predicted 25% traffic loss to all websites. You'll see some that go as high as 40, 50. I think there was a HubSpot thing where it was 80.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was
yeah.
I literally just parked this stat in an article that there are a couple of publications, I think media publications, that have reported between 80 and 90% of their organic traffic. Now, zero click as a phenomenon, I think that's where they were attributing most of it, is when the answer was given in an AI overview, they did not click through. They were counting that as a lost conversion. So I think, we go back to, I was having conversations with a vendor a little while back about, my attitude towards attribution. As people in digital marketing, attribution was sort of like the holy grail, right? Maybe personalization is the holy grail, but I guess we'd never get to it. But attribution was an achievable kind of metric that kind of governed our understanding of whether or not something was effective. And I think a lot of that, I mean, we are having to rethink the whole playbook. This is a lot of what I talked to Eric Stein about in our conversation about the death of SaaS. Right. And the death of software. And this, everyone's sort of been chanting this since we saw the big market correction, the SaaS apocalypse, which kind of seems tame now these days. Like the big corrections we're seeing right now are tanks are even worse. But I think what he was getting at is, this kind of intersection of orchestration, the complexity, the madness of everything that exists out there. You mentioned the corpus of the internet, but what about just the corpus of all the data and the tools that marketers have in their ecosystem? Like sometimes 40 or 50 different tools, hundreds of different concerns. The visibility, what you just talked about. How can I ensure that I'm going to show up in the answer engines? How do I structure content that is going to be consumable, eatable, using the eat word again, by the bots that are crawling it, but then also something that humans care about? And then I think the last piece of it is, how do you make those endearing kinds of connections through personalized content, through dynamic, less static, more dynamic kinds of content that are adaptive to what users are interested in. And the intersection of those things and rethinking how, AI came along just at the right time, that, we kind of reached this peak saturation with SaaS. Like everyone's using SaaS, we all pay for it the same way. We're all looking for the next buck to sort of evolve the value of the model. And AI comes in and tries to break it, by saying, hey, you can build your own tools, you can do your own stuff. But the reckoning for me is that just looking at how, say, Product Hunt and Chris Messina, my conversation with him about how vibe coding has kind of invaded that ecosystem, that people are just building apps hand over fist, but those apps are not performant, right? They're not production worthy. They're great prototypes. Maybe they can stand up a little bit. We saw famously on LinkedIn that Cursor, which is, effectively a sort of vibe coding tool, decided that they can, for $260, they can go make their own CMS, migrate everything from Sanity and put it into their own build and use Markdown and raw code. Well, if you have the technical knowledge, you can do that, right? But how do you make that scalable? And the biggest thing for me is not, you would think, okay, HIPAA compliance, FedRAMP, enterprise scalability, security, all the things that you would worry about. Those would be the things that would, be in my mind as an analyst. But what really sticks out for me is the question of, even if you can replicate it, can you roadmap it? Even if you can make something just like you see out there, a CRM, ERP tool, whatever it might be, do you have the knowledge? Do you have the industry knowledge and the wisdom to think about what's next? And the reason why the tools that we have been around for a long time is because they've been listening to customers, they've been trying to think ahead of the market, but also create the feedback loops with users to build better software products. And this is why software is at, I think, a rebirth in all of this. Certainly the models are changing. The way we pay for it, the way we deliver it's going to be a little bit different. CDPs are moving from MTUs to like compute utilization. So there's a lot of the fabric that's changing, but the blanket itself is still, I think, solid. And that's what we talk about. This article is going to be available later today. But I think it's a good segue to, Matt, to maybe talk a little bit about a thing you just mentioned. And I want to hand it back to you a little bit, I'll do some setup. But I talked to Adam Greco, who I mentioned before the call, is a longtime friend of mine now. I've been talking to him since his Amplitude days, so going back maybe 5 or 6 years. And he came from Omniture, which was a small company based in Utah that
I remember
in
them.
the you might remember
Analytics.
them. Yeah, so they were a big deal. They were purchased by Adobe in 2009, I think, and with that, sort of took Adam's great work at elevating what web analytics was at the time into this new field of digital analytics. And he wrote this book about Adobe Analytics that actually changed people's lives. And I did an podcast interview with him, which you can get at cmscritic.com. And in the interview, he talks about how this guy came up to him at an event he was at. He does like hundreds of events. He's at an event talking about digital analytics. And this guy comes up to him and he's got this old, like tattered copy of this Adobe book that he wrote way back in the day, back when you used to get physical books. And the guy came up to him and said, "Hey, I needed to tell you how important this book was to me. It changed my life. Because of this book, I was able to advance my career, become so valuable that I was able to move to the United States I think he was from India. And when I came here, I met my wife. We now have kids. And I feel like this book was that gateway for me being able to do that." And I was like, oh my God, it's just we all aspire to have that kind of a story that we can tell. And in Adam's new book, which we talked about principally, he focuses on we'll call it the role or the discipline of being a product evangelist, which is something that you're talking about right now. This idea that you're going to go out there and be an expert in a subject like GEO or AEO and how it's changing things. Yeah, it's benefiting your product or your solution directly, but at the same time, you're trying to elevate the whole market's awareness about it. And in this podcast, we go into practical examples of how you can be a better product evangelist, actually what it is, what it means to be that, and why at a time when AI is sort of consuming everything, human voices are becoming the signal through the noise, right? It's breaking through all of the sort of the AI slop that's being created. And I think that's what we're trying to do, right? And I want to get your thoughts on this. When you think about influencing, when you think about the live events that we do, how does this idea of product evangelism play into that?
I think you need to be an evangelist, right? Whether it's for a product, whether it's for a brand, whether it's for where you work, what your interests are, who you are, and you should be connecting them. Because that novel analogy brought forth by you, the unique innovation or combination innovation that we all are, is what will rise above the noise. And oftentimes we pretend to be a version of ourselves that we think the context we're in or the audience we're talking to, we think they want to hear that.
Mm.
When in reality, lean into being the unique person you are. Put clothes on every day. Don't go out into the world without them, but be uniquely you, as long as it's not that. And I'll tell you, the part of AI and GEO that has really unlocked for me is that fact that I've been talking about influencing for a few years, and I never quite felt it had a home in our industry. It was an ancillary, cool tactic you can do in it. This kind of connected it to the point last week, I think it was last Friday, I had a call. I used to work, I've always been in tech, but I used to work on the technology arm of a communications and public relations company that my dad founded. He was just a phenomenal PR entrepreneur, going back to being an editor of the Star Ledger of New Jersey, the Washington bureau chief, a chief of staff to one of the longest serving U.S. senators. He was his first chief of staff, and then moving right on into being a television host and being at the intersection of that early internet and the old way of media and all that. And I worked with a really great PR professional back then named Adam Dvorin. I will name drop him. We could tag him in. And he reached out to me and he said, hey, can we talk about how you're seeing the things that are in your tech sphere and what you're talking about, how that impacts a PR firm? He has continued on. He's a leader in a small PR firm out of, well, what is small anymore? I don't know, but a boutique PR firm, PR firm outside of Philadelphia. And we were just talking about his workflow, and it was amazing to me that everywhere you go, there you are. We're back. I really believe, and I've been working on some proposals lately and having some discussions, there is now a meaningful add-on to what has become AI visibility auditing and on-site recommendations to appear. There is now a true add-on for public relations. Here's why. YouTube is a huge driver of all search. I think it's the second highest search engine. I don't know if that's changed now with AI. Second highest search engine, firsthand experience, transcripts, media, all that, right? And then you hear about all the places that AI likes to cite. We talk about Reddit. We talk about news websites. We talk about .govs. We talk about Wikipedia. These are earned media spots. We talk about things like tripsavvy.com. So there is now a whole world of PR back in the fold to help you with your visibility. And that to me has been one of the coolest epiphanies, where you thought PR was dying. And maybe that word public relations, because it sounds like such a funny term, maybe that is, but what they were doing in that company I worked at 20 years ago, my dad's company, and what he had been doing in the 90s before a lot of tech and all that, it's not different now. We're pitching angles to outlets that can be cited. So you have your on-site and you have your off-site. And the off-site, you're not calling someone necessarily, but you're making a pitch for your content to appear so that it can then be another citing signal. And that has that's been something that is really, really fascinating to me about how it all comes around. And I think you have to continue to think this way. You can't think the old ways of how we've always done things, or how we've always sold things, or how we've always built things. And I think there's an anxiety that's brought in because you want that old way because it's what you know.
Right.
But when you can give yourself to there's the new way, and let me put my eat signals, as I said in our talk, eat your own dog food and drink your own zero cliquot champagne.
Yep.
Do that. Whole new worlds, I think, will open up. And Eric Stein, calling it back to Eric, who you talked about, the Psychor CEO, I produced an interview between him and the CEO of Altudo, Rahul Khosla, where Eric essentially was talking all about GEO and AI visibility. And he's the true source of this because he is a storyteller, 2 Tony Awards, really a love of the arts and creating and all that, and being a great businessman. But he talked about storytelling does not change. The channels change. First, it was TV, a couple TV stations, a radio station in town, or a couple if you could move your signal. Newspapers, there's like a couple, and New York has a lot of them, but there are a couple. And you have to use PR to pitch to get into them, because writers go up the chain and they don't start writing important things until they were in the job 20 years, right? So then YouTube comes, podcasts come, online blogs. You talked about the slop of the amount of companies built on AI. It reminds me of those early days of when media changed and we had blogs and everybody and their mother had a blog,
Right.
or the everybody had to do it for their mother, right? And then everybody, when podcasts came, everybody had a podcast because
Yeah.
we all want to try it out. But honestly, the storytelling and the passionate practitioners, they will remain. It doesn't mean that podcasting died or that blogging died. It meant that everybody thinking they could do it went away. And there's maybe many more than would have done it before when there were only a few outlets, but it's not dying. But it gave us a democratized chance to try it. But it's still there and it's still really important.
Yeah.
And storytelling will always remain authentic storytelling.
Yeah.
So that to me is invigorating.
I love it. It's making me think that we should do an episode. Now, I think back in 23 or 24, I did a keynote opening at a conference, and I relayed some advice on how vendors that were in the room, mostly, they're typically the usual suspects sending me press releases. Um, that here are things that I look for in press releases, right? These are things that kind of catch my attention. I thought it was interesting when when I was actually sitting down to start to write this interview that I did with Eric, and I think the authenticity piece of this is so important that, while we use AI tools to record, transcribe, kind of suck things in and make it much easier for us to go back and, more easily access the things that were happening at that moment and organize our thoughts around it, bringing that authentic voice to what we do is so important. That's what cuts through. That's what makes the impact. That's what gets people to want to read, right? Because people can tell when things have been AI generated. And I think it's interesting that when I was sitting down to write it, I got a press release from a company I wasn't super familiar with. So it was a relatively new vendor on my radar screen outside of in the MarTech stack, but outside of CMS DXP. And they asked me if I wanted to. I just talked to Eric about the death of SaaS, and as you read in the beginning of the article, I go back and do some research on how many times the death of SaaS or the death of software has been used over the years, and I focused more recently, and I went further back as well, and it's a very interesting part of the article in the very beginning. But as I was sitting down to write this, I got a pitch. I said, "Hey, would you like to write an article about the death of SEO?" And I was like, uh, I'm feeling very morose now. I feel like maybe I need to
You're an
pause.
undertaker of trends.
Right. So I need to take a break on the death, the macabre as a thematic tool. It's like Stephen King or something. So I found that interesting, but we might want to do an episode where we bring in someone from the PR side, Matt, because I think this is an area I think there are renaissances that are happening. Like you talk about newspapers, I think there's a reason why they're still around, right?
Yeah.
There's a reason why the medium is tactile and it still registers with people, even in an age where we have all this digital stuff, so many different channels that we can experience things on. There's something momentary about the paper. When you read an idea that's in print, it feels like it's been memorialized, right? It's not ephemeral. And I really love that about the experience of reading something in a physical book, that maybe there's a generational cohort experience relative to all of that. I think you and I probably spent a lot of Sundays with the paper in the sports section, kind of, out on the kitchen table and kind of reading things. I mean, that was just something I loved doing, and that was around for a long time. But what you're talking about too is also change management. And in organizations that are dealing with AI, especially with the scale of impact that's happening, you can't just adopt these tools and not have a philosophical approach to how we're going to lead an organization through that change. At the top, you have to really be thinking about change management on that order and magnitude, especially in large enterprises where they're at a disadvantage. I think smaller companies, like you mentioned, the lean boutique companies, they can pivot a lot faster. They can learn Riverside FM. They can do all these things in a much more direct way. When you go up to big organizations, enterprise organizations, it's difficult for them to pivot and immediately adopt and embrace. So you're onto some really good stuff here around PR. Maybe we could think about, having a deeper conversation about, all right, what does PR, in fact, I know somebody who this would be a perfect person. So we'll do a catch up after this. And I'm sure he would love to have a conversation with us about that. So let's put a note on that to definitely dig deeper. I really love this topic.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I was telling this Adam Devoren again, the thing I was telling him too was, he was saying, we do these discovery meetings with our customers in terms of discovering their message, and we'll set up a Zoom, and you're essentially bringing their leaders on who would talk on behalf of the company, and hearing they're pitching you almost, and then you're going to mold what they say. And I told Adam, like Riverside, I'm probably giving it away, but like Riverside,
do you have an affiliate code?
Yeah, right. Record those conversations with those leaders and clip them, and then try the messages out and see which ones actually resonate first. And now you're getting cited content too. But the other thing I just wanted to quickly bring up, which is connected to the old media, my old job, I came up as I'm grizzled, right? I'm not even that old yet, but I came up as a writer for the website of the then New Jersey Nets. And it was at such a time where they would allow a 24-year-old kid the keys to the entire outlet, and I'm going up against those old school writers who had applied their whole trade for 20 years getting donuts and coffee, and they finally get the beat for a pro team, and there's a 24-year-old kid doing it for the website.
I love it.
Traveling with the team, Ritz-Carlton's, all this. But we used Omniture. You brought that up.
Yeah.
Omniture, that's where I knew it from. It was the analytics provider for the NBA at the time.
Isn't that crazy?
So you're talking about the death of SaaS, SEO. I'm going to say, no matter what we call the death of, what we will never have the death of is serendipity. And serendipitous encounters are one of the coolest parts of life when you lean into them. You were talking about that gray matter in the world, what we don't see, the invisible. I think serendipity is the invisible upside down of all of us.
Oh, Stranger Things.
Stranger Things. So, partner at iMedia, who I've known for a bit over a year now from a Boy and Company conference, Joel Macaluso. He was introduced through Roger Williams, who I think you were the first podcast guest on. Roger Williams, is it? I forget the name of it.
It's called Agency Intel.
Agency Intel. That's how you get double advertising, by the way. You go, I forget the name, and then someone else says it. But
well done. No, don't give away all our secrets, dude. Come on.
But
and by the way, I did promote. I did tag Joel in episode 2, and it's a great episode. They get in some really great stuff. But go ahead. Continue.
Yeah, no, it was great. And so they so by these serendipitous encounters that happen, it doesn't just have to be from a Boy and Company. It can be from any community you're in, Sitecore, Optimizely, Mock Alliance, right? Anywhere. It could be your local Little League board, which I just joined last week.
That's right. That's right. You did.
But the serendipity of community is great. So Roger has Joel on as his second podcast after you'll always be the first. And then by those collaborations, you talk to somebody more than you might have otherwise, and then you follow up with, here's the episode, here's what you can say, thanks so much for doing it. Oh, by the way, I'm having a dinner in Tampa. I know, Joel, you left New Jersey. I'm just putting that part in, mad at that, but left New Jersey for the warmer climes of Florida, and he's in St. Petersburg, Tampa Bay area. He says, why don't you come to this dinner? So Joel goes, yeah, I'm going to lean into the Matt McQueenie way of doing things. Let's go to a dinner. And at that dinner, he meets a guy named Peter, who the next day he reaches out to me. He goes, hey, I met this really great guy we should talk to. His name is Peter. He used to work for like the Celtics and then the UFC and then Meta. And now he's doing his own independent paid social consulting operation. And I wrote right away, Peter Stringer? And Joel went, do you know everybody? And I said, no. When I was that upstart blogger for the New Jersey Nets, he was the analogous upstart blogger for the Boston Celtics. So we were like the same people at the same time. And then I went on to move to other things. He stayed in that role for 12 years, ultimately became VP of marketing at the Celtics, took that job and moved into VP of social media for the UFC. And then he was there a bit, then was at Meta, and then happened to move down like 4 years ago to Clearwater, Florida, I think. And then there he is trying to go to conferences like we all are, out there trying to connect, meet people, drum up opportunity. And he meets Joel. And we had a call today, and I saw him. He was on like a video thing doing he was walking through the sunny Florida. But that, man, like the magic of serendipity it's undefeated. It will beat any macro trends, micro challenges. Lean into it, because it really is magic. All these years later, that crazy connection of things. Now, you must have that happen a million times a week with as much as you connect with different people. And it's probably a fun part of connecting all those nodes when they weren't visibly able to be connected before.
Oh man, it's the best part of doing this. I think serendipity is a great wrapper for what you're describing, and I think being open to the possibility that anything can happen. When you go to an event, instead of like holding back, being more vocal, being more confident in, and this is stuff that Adam would talk about. He actually talks about in the book. It's a great read, by the way. This product evangelism, and you can get on CMS Critic, if you go to the ride along article. The links to the book is free. It's on Writebook, which is a pretty cool platform. You got to read it on your laptop or your tablet, but I mean, that's easy to do. I found it incredibly useful. It validated a lot of things for me that I think I know, but at the same time, it opened up new ways of thinking about how to better frame talks and presentations so that they're memorable in the right ways. And he bases that off of years of sitting through really bad presentations. Like he's got a high bar now, and he's always shooting for how can I make this better. And he makes it very practical. And I think the call to action is, again, at a time when there's so much stuff that's automated, and we have that expectation that much of our digital strategy is going to be, the domain of agents, right? We're going to have a lot of agents performing functions for us in lean organizations where it makes sense for them to perform those kind of low level tasks. The ability for us to then focus on, I'm speaking at JDay USA. I'm speaking at Umbraco's Code Garden event. You're speaking at different events. I mean, it gives us more time, I think, to think about how we make those human connections. And that's what I think we should all be endeavoring to do is where can we be our most authentic selves and bring the gifts that we have to the work that we do. I've heard that story before. I bet if I ask Peter, like, does he know where French Lick, Indiana is, he's going to know right away who's from French Lick, Indiana, given his Boston Celtics heritage.
Well, he saw the interesting thing with him is I came to the Nets right at the end of their glorious run in their own history. And it was at the end of the Jason Kidd era. Vince Carter was there, Richard Jefferson. And I got to see one playoff series win. Then they lost in the second round to the LeBron James Cleveland Cavaliers when he was very young. It was quite a thing to be courtside at. But then it was over the next year. I finally got the chance to travel, all this. And halfway through that season, they traded Jason Kidd to the Mavericks. And you could see the way, which is analogous, I think, to any industry and business and SaaS and all that. You can see the way, if the product is not up to snuff anymore, nothing you do matters when you're, what's the term, gilding the lily. When you're telling the story of the product, what mattered is the product. What mattered is on the floor. So product evangelism is brand evangelism. Your product is your best manifestation of brand. And then Peter, the next year, was when they brought in Kevin Garnett, and he added Paul Pierce and Ray Allen to Paul Pierce, and they jokingly called it the PGA Tour, Pierce, Garnett, and Allen, and they won like 60 games, won the championship, and so all of a sudden he's in a higher echelon of visibility, because on those Omniture analytics, which I would look at those things like a hawk because it was my stories, and I learned PR there because I would learn if I could pitch this to the editor at NBA.com, and they got it there, that might make my story go from 5,000 views to 25,000 views.
Right.
And then after a while, the editor would be like, yeah, I'm not going to do this every time. So it's like an AI citation, but you saw at the end of every month, you saw the analytics for every team.
Yeah.
The Lakers were always number one, whether they were good or bad. They were just were always. So you saw the power of you saw the power of brand and platform, regardless of output. And they had enough of a history and legacy of winning. But you would see teams, and the Celtics were a huge brand, but they were terrible right before making those trades. That's why they were in a position to make those trades, because they had high picks that they could trade.
Right.
But then you see the minute it happens, it's back, and it's like that Back in the New York Swing song starts playing, and that it's the power of what we do in any context we live in, is we can be the best at what we're doing in marketing and sales. And that's always a big focus for me, and pipeline, because I think there's a visibility or invisibility cloak to pipeline too, when you're talking about marketing and all that, and evangelism. How do you connect it, attribution, like you said, to exactly something that leads to an opportunity?
It's a great point. That's not to cut you off, but
Yeah.
that is a great point. That's an excellent point. And he goes into that in the book. Like, there is when organizations are thinking about, how do I need this role? How do I justify or quantify the value of said role when I put someone in that position of being the product evangelist? And you said something else too that was really smart about, it is brand evangelism as well. Because I think any kind of evangelism you're doing around a company's product is ultimately going to serve the brand of that product's ambitions. But I think it's also your personal brand. The part and parcel of what Adam has done is become the voice, is become the product himself. And the more you kind of up and this I think plays perfectly into influencing and sort of the equation and the dynamics that you've created around that, which I think is, you're right, is more, perhaps even more extensible to the audiences that we talk to in tech. I think I told you I read an article recently that it wasn't, I think it was Business Insider, and they said like the highest paid position in enterprises right now are thought leaders. They're being paid the most money because they need real human voices to talk about things now, because so much has been automated with AI, and having the proximity, the understanding, the sensitivities, the intimacy around what products mean, how to connect with audiences. I mean, people with the mind share are now being pursued by brands to be the ambassadors of those messages. And I think there's a reason why, and actually there's a chapter in the book that talks about the differences between a product evangelist or evangelist and say a celebrity endorsement, like Michael Jordan and Nike, right? He's not an expert on the product. He's an expert on basketball, but he's not an expert on shoes. But that didn't matter, right? He was an ambassador for the brand. So there's a kind of a fine line. He gets into that. We actually talk about that in the podcast. But listen, I could talk all day about this. We actually live it, and I think that's why we could probably do a little bit more analysis on this as we go along. I do want to save some time to talk a little bit about what we have coming up, because we're entering a busy speaker live conference schedule. Why don't we start with what you got going on with Boy and Company community, because there are a few dates on the calendar we should probably remind people of.
Yeah, so 2 weeks from this week, so it's actually not less than 2 weeks, on the 7th, we're going to be in San Jose at PayPal for the West Coast CMS experts. I'm going to be hosting that one, so I'm going to fly out the day after Easter. If anybody's around San Jose on that Monday, because of the time shift, I will be in early. Hopefully, without TSA stuff, I'll be in early. Get together there. It's funny too. You ever do this? I was watching the Elite, or no, Sweet 16 games last night.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, they're in San Jose, and you miss it by a week. You don't even realize these things are happening in a place.
You get excited for a second, and then it doesn't work out, right?
Yeah. So we're going to do that one on the 7th. So definitely, if you're in the area, come on by. And then We're going to do, on the 8th, we're going to have a Midwest digital leaders meeting in Grand Rapids at the offices of BizStream and our friend Brian McKeever over there. I
Yes, yes.
actually really, my wife or people I know will look at this schedule and say, "Are you nuts?" And I,
Yes.
I don't, yeah, yes, and because you get to go to Austin the day after. I love Austin, but to me, it's serendipity. When
Mm.
would you? It's been a while since I've been to San Francisco. I think it was about 2 years ago. My brother got married out there, so it was a real quick shotgun trip. But
Not a shotgun wedding.
not a shotgun wedding. No, it was not that. A shotgun trip. That's a
Interesting
bad.
choice of words, McQueenie. You're like, I went out there for a shotgun trip. Okay.
It was a relaxed trip, but a shotgun wedding.
Is there something we didn't know? There's suddenly there's a baby a few months later.
Yes and no, but not because of it. But yeah, you know
Right.
how it goes.
Yep.
But yeah. So I like the idea. Obviously, going to San Francisco, it's good to get to places and
Yeah.
get around and experience it more, and to have a reason to go out there, right? To be able to host a meeting like this. And so I'm going to do that. And then, there is a part of me that says you only live once, and how many times are you trying to get yourself from San Francisco to Grand Rapids on a day's notice? I don't think there's many. Maybe traveling salesman in the 1980s. I don't know. But Grand Rapids, though, is where American Pie was
This
based
is
off
true.
of.
This is
So I
true.
learned
One
that
of
in a
its
good episode. Anyone wants to look back, Coniverse episode we did with Brian McKeever, where he talked all about growing up there, and his whole business is tied there. His
yeah.
college career was tied there. He's really built. He's like a great modern story of building a business where you are sourcing with local talent. Really good story, but
Yeah.
not a direct flight. Really good story, not a really good flight. So the one option was to fly all the way back to Newark and then to fly. And I'm sorry, if I touch down 50 minutes from home, I'm not getting on a plane and going back west. So I did find one,
Right.
leave around midnight, get to Chicago midway around, or no, maybe O'Hare, I forget which one, around 5 in the morning. And then there's a flight 9 a.m. So I'll get in there around lunchtime. I got to be honest, it's a once in a lifetime. It's kind of neat. I mean, just dropping into Grand Rapids and
Yeah.
making a time of it. You'll
You
probably
just
meet.
drop it into Grand Rapids. Yeah. I'm sorry I can't make it. I think I'm partly to blame for this. I saw McKeever last July in Detroit when we did the meeting with Jen at the Detroit Museum of Art, and we had a fantastic day. Brian trucked in. It's a couple-hour drive, I think. And he and I, we went out for drinks after, hung out for quite a while, and had great conversation about things. But he said, "Hey, would you guys be interested in doing this at Grand Rapids?" And I'm like, yeah, I think we would. I think I said that maybe after a couple cocktails. Yeah, I think Grand Rapids, that sounds like a good idea. We should do that. But one of the points he was making too was, and it kind of plays into everything you just described, that this is a hometown story, but it's also like taking pride in the city that you work in. And I've noticed like about Bruno in Czech, where Keniko, Content AI, they're like this hometown success story, and I think it is a tech hub, but they are very endeared to kind of the local ecosystem, and there's a pride that comes with kind of identifying with that hometown community. But the other interesting thing too about Grand Rapids is I think that I believe that Payload was there as well.
I
Payload
think you're
CMS,
right.
which was purchased by Figma a couple years back, and so there's an interesting kind of knowledge base that exists there too, much in the same way we think of the Scandinavian countries as kind of the cradle of CMS, that there's this place where a lot of the great thinking was coming from. And I think they don't call it Grand Rapids for nothing, right? You're going to go experience what makes it grand. And even if you have to get there by Route 66, you're going to make it, and you'll now have a story. So I think that's what I love about you doing this.
Well, and the funny part is right outside of Grand Rapids is what's called the Chicago Riviera. I think it's a town called Holland. It's right on I think it's
I've
Lake
heard of this.
Michigan.
Yeah, I've heard of
But
this.
you never, if you're the Riviera and you're not Riviera, it's usually not quite.
Yeah,
If you need to give an opener to Riviera. But yeah, no, I'm one of my favorite things again is the serendipity of saying you're going to be in a place and seeing who DMs you, and
Yeah.
it's like, oh, right. And to me, there is nothing cooler than sitting in a coffee house or a bar with somebody who happened to see you're going to be somewhere
Yeah.
and was like, I'll see you. And it's like it wouldn't have happened otherwise. There's actually one, we'll see if it happens. But I have a coffee house in my town in Sparta called Cloveberry. Best coffee I've ever had. Great
Mm.
menu, and it happens to be in town. The two owners are a husband and wife who met each other, I think, working in the kitchen of like the Park Avenue Hotel or something like that. And they were in New York. And then for like
Wow.
15 years, they had a coffee house right on West 4th Street around NYU. It's actually where I went to college. I didn't know this at the time because it was many years ago. They would go from Sparta, New Jersey to NYU, even though we joked about me getting in there to see you. It's not the easiest thing from where I live,
I know. I
but they
know.
would go there. It would take forever. And they would go
Yeah.
from Sparta to there every day and have that coffee shop. And then they sold it and they go, let's just open the same place right in our town. So we get the benefit of this. And the community that comes around this is amazing. One of which is a guy we call Google Dave, and he's the global head of travel at Google. He's the coolest guy. We both have kids in Little League and the same travel teams, and his are a little older. He has twins, and I was talking to him today. I mean, I've used him as a resource. I've probably known him now for 10 years somehow. It's crazy how that happens. Used him as a resource for when I was in my MBA, as he's really high up at Google. He's like basically one of the original New York employees.
No kidding.
And
Wow.
yeah,
Okay.
and I was talking to him about what I'm doing. I'm going here. He goes, oh, one of the guys, he has a very tight knit group who works with him. So it's not some sprawling enterprise, but it's like partnerships with travel and how they appear within Google. So it's kind of a cool
Yeah.
job.
Yeah.
But he goes, oh, one of my guys relocated from San Francisco to Grand Rapids. So he lives there now. I'm like,
Wow.
what? So, and then his wife is the CTO at a huge local furniture company, global furniture company. I was like, huh, hey, can I send you? So I sent the PDF and I was like, can we get him there? Because to me, that is serendipity at the highest level.
Yeah. I
That guy
love it.
shows up in Grand Rapids and now you got Google and this huge
Yeah.
furniture
So
company.
cool.
And that is why it's not only why we do this, but it is a labor of love, I guess you'd call it.
Yeah, I think
But
so.
how bad is it? It's not, it's a first world problem. Well, hopefully we get there. The TSA problems notwithstanding, sometimes these things
Yeah.
go away in days, but it's to be on location with people.
Yeah.
We could say we're doing it to beat the AEO engines. We could say, but there's nothing better than that in-person meeting in a locale, in an office that's not yours, experiencing someone else's local context, bringing people into the tent,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
documenting it through our channels before, after, what came out of it, and keeping this this positive visibility circus going.
Yeah. Yeah. Visibility in the physical world too, which I think these are where we make the best connections. So I'll be on the 9th. I can't join you, unfortunately, in either of those meetings because on the 9th, on the 8th, I'm going to Austin. The day of the 9th, we've got meetings where a Content Stack is actually going to host us again in Austin. So really excited to be back with their team. Rakshana and a few other people are going to be there. I believe we'll have some people that were at last year's meeting as well attending. A few new faces, but I'm excited because we will get an opportunity to talk a little bit about Content Con, which is coming later this year. So I'll have some follow up and catch up on that. But yeah, so excited to do that. And then I think you and I are both in. There's a couple things maybe in between, so
Yeah.
we'll get to talk a little bit more before we get to New York in early May, and then we've got Frankfurt in mid-May, which is the big meeting, and there's a lot more. Just a lot more we can talk about there. We can check that for now. So those are the upcoming meetings. If anybody out there is in the area, you're in San Jose, Mountain View, you can make it up to see Matt at PayPal headquarters, and then Grand Rapids, of course, and then Austin. If you're in the Austin area, reach out to me. We've already had some kismet happen there as well. We'd love to have you. And then I just want to briefly mention a couple things. So on CMS Critic the last couple weeks, some interesting stories about. I talked to a company called Fiber AI, which is effectively turning URLs into intelligent agents. And there's not enough time for us to talk about it this week, but I think on a future episode we'll dig in, perhaps maybe bring in a special guest that I'm thinking of right now, to talk about how Google is potentially going to take your low performing pages and through AI turn them into higher performing landing pages that they create, right, on your behalf. And
With
I think
AI, right?
with AI, right? So this is giving brands a moment to pause and catch their breath about, well, are they going to hijack my brand because it isn't, we're not abiding by whatever principles or rules of SEO and GEO that help the answer engines do their job. They're going to do it for me. So there's some ethical questions, which, if we're being honest, Google, YouTube, Google, go read my my or listen to my podcast from last year with Ari Paparo about Google and the antitrust stuff. But then also YouTube recently in trouble with there's been this ongoing court case about YouTube being part of the social phenomenon of addiction with young children. And I that is been a problem that I think we've been tracking for a long time, but now we're seeing litigation with big tech starting to swing in that direction. Go listen to the Ari Paparo interview. He used to work for DoubleClick. He worked for Google. He was on the inside. He was on the outside. He wrote a book about the whole thing. He was in the court in Virginia when the cases were going on. He was reporting live. So we had a really interesting discussion about all that. Long story short, Fiber AI is enabling you as a brand to say, hey, I want to turn intelligent URLs into intelligent agents with AI and effectively create better performing landing pages. They have something called an agentic web platform that they're now promoting. So a very interesting article. Oxio, which is a customer journey orchestration platform I've been paying attention to over maybe the last year or so. And they're now reaching, just to give you an idea, like 100 billion autonomous decisions in their system. So when we think about the scale of what AI is enabling organizations to do to really better understand, and kind of like what Adam Greco was telling me about in his move to Hightouch, from Amplitude, where he was on the analytics side, into a CDP. And he thought of it as really being like moving up a level, in the sense that we have the data warehouse, we have Customer 360. Analytics tells us what happened. Customer 360 technologies are helping us to better enable how we are prospecting for new customers, especially in an age where we're dealing with first-party, third-party data and all the complexities and compliance around that. So really fascinating article. That's another good one to check out. And then I think you also have just a last mention. You have a couple of events you're speaking at. You want to mention those as well?
Yeah. So it looks like I'm going to do the SugCon, which is Sitecore User Group New York. I'm going to do a talk on, you guessed it, AI visibility and GEO. That's actually going to be in person. I don't know if the alert came out, but word is it's going to be at the Data Weavers New York City offices. And I know Data Weavers is coming on real strong this year, especially. I have a podcast episode up with their new, I think he's head of go-to market in America, Janae Usel. He was from Optimizely before. Fascinating story. So listen to that one. And then Jill from Data Weavers, who used to be at Valier, has been real active out there. They're doing well in March Madness. And then the next day, the Optimizely Roadshow, New York City, is April 16th. Looking forward to that. And then the week after, Adobe Summit is going to be happening. I will be on location around there because we'll be there as iMedia. We're very strong in the performing arts sector. And there's a conference called CIO Arts. So the CIOs from the different performing arts organizations. I think it's a pretty intimate gathering of about 50, 60. When you get into the C-suite, there's not as many of those in the pyramid. Right. And I will be also giving a talk focusing on AI visibility, especially with the performing arts. And not to make anyone feel bad, because most websites are not equipped for it because it did not exist before. So there's a lot of low-hanging fruit and quick wins to get cited. And when you talk about thought leadership, I don't think there can be a better place to start than with organizations who literally have stages and rooms that they fill people with on the words or musical
Yeah.
proclivities of individuals. So that'll be really exciting. It's not a vertical I had really worked with a lot before here. It's
Mm,
one, I mean, you and I, it's one that we've all benefited from going to all the time, and it's fascinating. So that has been something that's really exciting, and I look forward to getting to know a whole new community
yeah.
out there in Las Vegas. I think it's been quite some time.
Can you let's try to do something while you're out there, just to get some, some insight to what's happening. I think it's
Sure.
interesting. We started this conversation. We're talking about Broadway and performance, and now we're at the end of it. We're talking about the technologies that are used to, empower how people can choose their seat when they're booking, how they can learn about, upcoming events. I mean, there's a whole ecosystem that's designed around specialization. That
Tessatura. Yeah.
Yep, that's it, right, Testator. That's giving me an idea, so I wanna make a note about that to talk to you and Joel about that, 'cause I'm doing an article right now on specialization. I'll leave it at this, but, I've talked to a whole bunch of, either agencies that have CMS products or CMS products that maybe have some specialized, we'll call it professional service practices that are really, creating some endearing loyalty in the communities that they're serving and the areas that they're serving. I think this is probably one that we could talk about with a little more intention. So let's make a note
Totally.
of that as well. But man, we covered a lot of stuff, right?
We did.
I don't want people to feel like they're drinking from a fire hose, but we invite everybody to, if you have ideas, you want us to talk about a certain topic, we'd love to hear from you. So please leave us notes in the in whatever channel you're watching this. We'll monitor it, and then you can reach out to us. You can get me through the CMS Critic website. You can get Matt and I through LinkedIn. On any of the places that we put this on YouTube, we always include the information to get in touch with us. And it's at Matt Show on YouTube if you want to follow it there. And we love talking to you guys. So please stay in touch.
Thanks, everyone.
It's Matt and Matt on your Monday morning. Stack tabs and coffee chats.